about some of the work that we've been doing across the state. Some of you are, actually none of the homestead associations here are members of the SHA. So CNHA's partner in homestead issues. The SHA is a statewide organization of homestead associations. I am the Mokupuni president of the SHA for Oahu. We have 8 member homestead associations, not all. Waimanalo and Princess Mahanu, there are a handful that are not members, but some are. So I am the Mokupuni president for the SHA Oahu Mokupuni Council and the president of the Council for Native Wine Advancement. And I was asked simply to share with you the presentation that we have been doing statewide. I'm not here to tell you that you should be pro-independence or you should be pro-federal recognition. I'm simply laying out a presentation that we are laying out for others. That choice is for every individual to make for themselves. So I'm going to turn here because there's too much light in the room, so the projector is not really visible on the white wall. So this is the presentation that I'm going to go through that you have in your hand, and I'm going to walk through that before your candidates forum. So the first slide is just to show you the structure of the SHA. All these homestead associations, that's the SHA, and those are the work of the Executive Council. I'm just going to quickly do the first pages to give you background. And it tells you some of the work of the SHA. These are some of the sessions that we do statewide on Native rights. Okay? Following that is about CNHA. CNHA is a member organization. Namaka, mahalo for being here. One of our board members. Some of our members, some of your groups here on Na'i Island are members of the council. We're 150 Native Hawaiian nonprofits serving our communities in various capacities. And we do these 4 things. We have a policy center, we do access to capital and homestead communities, we help our members raise funds, and we do an annual Native Hawaiian convention. That's who CNHA is. And in the back, that's the diagram to show you how CNHA operates, all of the member organizations, ourselves, and these are the major programs that CNHA does. So, our policy center was founded in 2004, really to bring our members and organizations together around policy priorities and solutions to meet challenges within the Native Hawaiian community. CNHA's position, and where we have been supportive of federal recognition, and we understand that not all folks are. We don't speak for you or your homestead association if you're not a member, but we definitely are very active in advocating our position and our members' position at the state level and in Washington, D.C. So, how is our partnership with the SHA? If we go to this partner, CNHA has various members who work in different capacities. So, for example, Hawaiian Community Assets, they lead our housing caucus. That we're not the expert of everything. We have members who do work in that arena. So, Hawaiian Community Assets convenes housing folks. They come up with priorities and they bring those to our policy center, and that's how we direct ourselves on what things we're going to chase down all year. The SHA is our homestead caucus leader. We don't take a position at the policy center without checking the pulse of homestead leaders to think and get their mana'o on what they think about this. So I'm just highlighting here how we coordinate and work with the SHA. So today is really about 3 things. What is Kana'iolowalu? What is Na'i Aupuni? And what do the DOI federal rules have to do with all of that? Okay? So, what is Kana'iolowalu? Kana'iolowalu in 2011, Act 195, a state law, created the Native Hawaiian Royal Commission. Your commissioner here, Commissioner Lake Kihoi on the Big Island, Oahu Commissioner, you have John Waihe'e and Na'alehu Anthony. Maui has Mahea Went, and Kauai has Robin Danner. Those 5 commissioners were appointed by Governor Abercrombie after passage of Act 195, which was a state law. And it was really created for that purpose, to create the Royal Commission, and the commission's job was to do one thing and one thing only, to make a list. They didn't have any other job. Their job was simply to make a list of Native Hawaiians. And that list, the purpose of that list was to pursue self-governance. That list was funded, the work of the Native Hawaiian Rural Commission did not get funded by the state legislature. That was funded by the Office of Hawaiian Affairs, but that was their job, to make the list. In 2013, the next act got passed, Act 77. You hear lots of people saying, well, I didn't sign up for Kana'iolowalu. How the heck did I get on that list? In 2013, the state legislature passed Act 77, again, another state law. And the purpose of that was to be inclusive of Hawaiians who were on other lists. At the time, I was at the Department of Hawaiian Homelands. We said no, we couldn't give those records of folks who were on the wait list at Hawaiian Homes because we had specific Privacy Act issues. And they did, after the whole talking through that at the state legislature, they took previous lists. They took Kana'iolowalu, they took, I don't know what the name of all those lists, but they took lists that OHA had formulated in the past for the purpose of self-governance and others, and they put that all together through Act 177. The Native Hawaiian Rural Commission complied, so you could have signed up under Kana'iolowalu and not Kana'iolowalu, but your name was transferred to this list. And there was one clause in there that the Native Hawaiian Rural Commission did. They made an opt-out process. So if your name was transferred and you don't want it transferred still today, you can opt out. Or, just like in a regular voter registration, just because you register doesn't mean that you're going to engage and go out and vote. You have those two options. If you're not into it, you don't want to vote, or you want to opt out and get off the list, period. Or if you want to be on the list, but you're not going to engage. That's totally up to you. So Kana'iolowalu, it was a list of Hawaiians, no matter where they lived in the world. Once the list was closed, once that list is closed, the Native Hawaiian Rural Commission has to publish it. And then the Native Hawaiian Rural Commission will dissolve. When is that commission going to dissolve? I don't know the answer to that. That is once we probably get to a convening, once Hawaiians get to a con-con, there really is no use for, once we start using the list, there will be no purpose for the Native Hawaiian Rural Commission, and they will have to dissolve. So that's what Kana'iolowalu is. We all good? Okay. Next, what is Na'i Aupuni? Na'i Aupuni is a private nonprofit. They are using the list created by Kana'iolowalu to convene Native Hawaiians. So today, as you know, or may not know, a voting opened through Na'i Aupuni. So folks who are on the Kana'iolowalu list of Native Hawaiians, you will receive an email, or if you don't have email, they went out in the mail, you will shortly be getting that. Your ballot to cast your vote for your delegates to represent you here on Hawaii Island. So Na'i Aupuni is a private nonprofit, and their purpose is to develop the Native Hawaiian constitution and government, not actually doing the government, doing the logistics of coordinating Native Hawaiians so that we can do the work of drafting the constitution and forming the Native Hawaiian government. Okay, so what does Na'i Aupuni do? What does that mean? That means Na'i Aupuni and those folks at that nonprofit, they're the ones sending out the notices to us. They don't get to vote for every delegate, but they're doing the logistics. They're the feet under the ground or on the ground doing the mail-outs. We'll have to have a convening somewhere. Their job will be to hold the convention space wherever that meeting is going to be. They are the logistical nonprofit. They were funded by the Office of Hawaiian Affairs through a grant process. Others had applied. We did. The Council for Native Hawaiian Advancement, SHAW, and the civic clubs, we applied and said, we want to help do the convening of logistics. They said no. This is the nonprofit that they picked. They picked Na'i Aupuni, and Na'i Aupuni is the logistical folks preparing us for Constitution and the government. So the work of Na'i Aupuni is embracing the list as the nation-building voters list. They're going to work off Kana'iolowalu. There was a deadline that said October 15th. You have to sign up by October 15th. I just want to be clear. The Native Hawaiian Rural Commission did not close the roll. October 15th deadline was to say, if you want to select one of the delegates from your respective island, if you want to be one of the voters to vote for one of those 40, you had to have signed up by October 15th so that it would give them at least 2 weeks to verify, because there's a verification process that says, are they a certified Native Hawaiian? Whether we like that or we don't like that, that is the process that they go through. So they put the cutoff date that says you have to be enrolled by October 15th if you want to select one of the 40 delegates. If you want to register today, you still can, because there is other work to be done. If what comes out of this CON is a constitution, all of the folks on the wait list will have to say to the delegates, yep, that's the constitution we want, or no, we will not have that. Go back or get rid of it or vote it down. So even if you didn't get on the roll by the 15th, if you want to vote on what comes out of that CON, you still have time to get on that list. So that is who Na'i Aupuni is. Na'i Aupuni was responsible for the apportionment, and I know that people have different ideas and opinions about apportionment. If I got to choose for myself, would I have done it this way? Probably not, but they did. So there are 40 delegates, 7 from the mainland, 20 from Oahu, 7 from the Big Island, 2 from Kauai, 3 from Maui, and 1 that represents Molokai Lanai. So the entire month of November is dedicated to voting for the delegates. Hawaii Island will vote only for the 7 delegates that you will select to represent you for your island. And the residency, where your residency is on the base roll, tells you where you can vote for. Okay, so that's who Na'i Aupuni is. On slide that says 3 and 4 of what is Na'i Aupuni going to do, they're going to facilitate the convention of delegates that they assume will happen somewhere in mid-2016. And then they are also going to conduct a ratification of the voters of that document that comes out of the convention. And then here it says some of our kingdom independence proponents, folks who want independence, that strategy is don't engage, boycott, we don't want to have we don't want to do this process. And that's my cutty too. That's totally up to folks. There is a desire by some to kill any drafting of a Native Hawaiian only constitution, and that is again totally up to individuals. You choose for yourself what you want for you and your ohana. Bumpy will be the first to tell us, and he has. His desire is to replace, rather than a constitution, that he would rather replace that with what comes out of convention is a declaration of national identity, which is why he's engaging. He doesn't necessarily want us to come up with a constitution, but he wants to engage because he wants the outcome to be a declaration of national identity. So everybody has their own mana'o on what that will happen. So that's who Na'i Aupuni is, right? They use the list of Native Hawaiian voters. They help us to coordinate to get 40 delegates elected. They will oversee the drafting and the logistics for the Constitution, and then they will hold a ratification by the folks who are on the list of the document. The next page is about DOI rules on federal recognition. What does that have to do with this process? Some people want federal recognition, some people don't. The DOI rules are part of a process that we can choose if we so choose federal recognition. It provides core issues of the rules as currently drafted. So the federal government posted in its Federal Register, they published September 30th, a federal rule under the Obama administration for us to comment on, to say, Native Hawaiians, when you're done with your CON, if you decide that you want to pursue federal recognition, here's the process that you will follow to become recognized. Not to recognize us for the federal government to say you are a Hawaiian, for the federal government to say we recognize you as a governing body, right? It's not to tell us who we are, it's to tell us that yes, we're recognizing you as a governing body. So our approach at the SHA and at CNHA is that we've been doing informational sessions like this to let people know where we are and what process we are following. We will submit general support for the rules throughout the month of October, we've started, and November. And then we will submit substantive comments to the federal government on what we think about these rules after we get mana'o from folks in our community. Okay? So the core issues and the timeline process. If you look at this page, in 2013, President Obama and his administration committed to consider DOI action using the Department of Interior to promulgate a rule for us to establish a process for Hawaiians to engage in. In 2014, the DOI published the intent to draft rules for self-governance. And we all know they came across the state, did lots of hearings, filled with lots of frustrated folks about the process. Very few voices that were in support of that, and a loud voice of not being supportive. At the end of the day, comments submitted to the DOI were 5,124. The majority of those comments, according to DOI, were in support, opposite of what we saw on television throughout the state. In 2015, the DOI approves the next steps and are drafting the rules. They will host 4 teleconferences. 2 have happened already. We will also have one specifically for Hawaiian Homelands beneficiaries. So if any of you have homestead associations who are not on the Native Hawaiian organization list by the DOI and want to engage in that process, please let us know. We'll help you register. And they've just published a rule which is 70 some odd pages long. In 2016, will DOI approve the final rule? We don't know. That depends on the comments of Hawaiians. If you don't like the rule, you vote the rule down. If you're in support of the rule, you can tell them yes and why, or no and why. Okay? So that's what the federal rules are all about. Those are the core issues about federal rules. The reminder for you, there's a little diagram. What is federal recognition of a Native Hawaiian government? If you look at this little diagram, it shows you the federal government, it shows you the state and county governments, and under the state and county governments are the agencies that we deal with as Hawaiians. The Office of Hawaiian Affairs, the Department of Hawaiian Homelands, our Ali'i Trust or nonprofit or non-governmental organizations. Those are all the people that's where we are. Hawaiians are working with these organizations. Those organizations try to talk or speak for us at the state level, and then the state level to the federal level. Okay? What what federal recognition would do is this. Here's the federal government, state and county governments, and the same. Recognition means we stand up our own government, how we decide, and the government sees us as a governing entity. Just as Governor Ige sees your mayor, they have a government-to-government relationship, the county and the state. It doesn't mean that the county is under the state. It means Mayor Kinoi makes decisions about his jurisdiction in the land that he has authority over. And Governor Ige makes decisions about those decisions that he has authority over. It doesn't mean that Mayor Kinoi gets to violate state law, but he's his own government and with the state government, and they negotiate next to each other. A Native Hawaiian government would put you at the table with other governments. Instead of being under here, having the DLNR speaking for us at the state. Some people say yes, some people say no. But that is what that is what recognition of a Native Hawaiian government. We want a Native Hawaiian government that will allow Hawaiians to speak for themselves. When I look at Lanakila, if Lanakila was in charge on the Mauna, or an official of our Native Hawaiian government, I firmly believe that the decisions he would make for the Mauna are very different than the ones being made by the DLNR. That's just my example of why we see federal recognition the way we see federal recognition. So, the next slide is what do the rules say? The federal government, the rules say this, that the federal government is going to recognize a Native Hawaiian government. They're going to recognize one Native Hawaiian government. Not 5 or 10 or 20, because many people think that this is all about recognizing individual homestead associations. The federal government is very clear in their rules that they are going to recognize one Native Hawaiian government. It can have multiple political subdivisions for various islands, according to the rule, but there will be one government. Number 2, the rule says there will be no change or impact to federal programs for Hawaiians. There will be no change because of this rule to the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. There will be no change to any money that we receive for education, health, or housing through the Native Hawaiian Education, Native Hawaiian Health, or NAHASDA. That's what this rule says. And the last thing it says that we thought that was important after reviewing 70 pages, it says that they will not be, this Native Hawaiian government will not be part of American Indian or Alaska Native processes. They heard you loud and clear. They have acknowledged that you are not an Indian, and so we will not be a part of the American Indian process. What normally happens with Native American Indian tribes, when they get recognized, they have Part 83 of the Federal Register. They have their own process that they go through. As soon as that tribe is recognized, they are automatically eligible for Indian housing programs, for Indian roads programs, Indian energy programs. But your message was loud and clear, our message. We did not want to be an Indian, so we will be in no Native American Indian program. That's what we got for no Indian. We're not going to be in any Indian program. Secondly, we're not going to have any land into trust. Okay? So what does land into trust mean? Again, when a tribe is recognized and it has lands with jurisdiction over, those lands go into trust. Hawaiian said, we don't want land into trust. We don't want the federal government to have purview of our land. We should have those lands. What is the benefit of land into trust? You pay no taxes on the income earned on land into trust. And you're in charge of taxing who's on your land. So Walmart, Target here on Hawaii Island, Hawaiian homelands. If lands, I'm just using it as an example, homestead lands don't automatically go, but if those lands were land in trust for the Native Hawaiian government and Walmart was built, that's right, if, I'm just giving you an example, if the land in trust had a Walmart on it, and that Walmart was owned by the Native Hawaiian government, the income earned off land into trust is not taxable by the federal government. That goes to the Native Hawaiian government. If you said, I'm leasing this land to Walmart, and I want Walmart to pay us the taxes, then as the government, you tax the Walmart for being on your land. It doesn't matter. The rule says, Hawaiians, you don't want land into trust. We don't have land into trust. We're not in any Indian program. We're not with land into trust. And then, this is the part that I think gets people frustrated. That it says in the rule, it describes Congress's plenary power, their plenary authority over the Native Hawaiian government. That is because we didn't want to be an Indian. So when we want road money or we want energy money, we would have to go to Congress. That's what they have to use their plenary authority. If we want to negotiate for Native Hawaiian energy money, then we have to go through Congress and get that approved, program by program, because we didn't want to be an Indian. Right? We didn't get tucked into Indian programs. So, the next page, our core issues. What else does the federal rule say? It says reorganization and ratification of the document. This is how it has to happen. That we can use the Kana'iolowalu list or we can use other lists to organize the Native Hawaiian government. It need not be Kana'iolowalu, but there has to be a list to organize Native Hawaiians. On that list, for the federal government to acknowledge this government, folks on that list have to be citizens and Hawaiian. So you have to be a U.S. citizen and a Hawaiian for them to recognize your government in this relationship. For other relationships, that doesn't necessarily mean the same, right? Also, it says, as long as any small N and big N Hawaiian, it's not just about beneficiaries of the Hawaiian Homelands Trust, it specifically says that base roll has to be open to both small N and big N Hawaiians. It's not just about homesteaders. It says about the referendum and the ratification of the governing document that draft must be made available to Native Hawaiians who are enrolled on the list, that there has to be free and fair voting to all eligible Native Hawaiians, but it does not include non-Hawaiians. The federal recognition process does not include non-Hawaiians. And we also have to determine which votes were made by small N's and big N's. So small N's are Native Hawaiians as defined by the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, 50% blood quantum or their successors, and big N Hawaiians, any amount of Hawaiian, 50% less, it doesn't matter. Why is it that the federal government says that? It's not to exclude other Hawaiians from any process. The small N definition is simply this. We will probably get challenged. We always do. Small N's, the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act is the oldest and strongest defense that we have as Native Hawaiians, where the federal government is acknowledging a special trust relationship where they set aside lands for our people. It is the oldest and strongest federal law that identifies the federal government's trust relationship with the Hawaiian community. That's why they are very specific about the need to be inclusive of Native Hawaiians and small N, because they cannot violate their own federal law. Whether we like it or not, the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act is a federal law. Okay?
What's
So,
the difference between the small N and the big N? 50%.
the small N is the Native Hawaiian identified in the Commission Act, 50%. The big N is any amount of Hawaiian, the bigger group of Hawaiians. Yes?
I thought I saw something about a certain number of
Yeah, we're going to
small
get there.
N's,
That's the next page.
or this thing doesn't go.
Where what doesn't go?
You know, you need so many small N's.
That's on
to
the next
participate.
page. It says right here, more than half of the votes cast have to approve the document. So they're saying, in order for the federal government to acknowledge that this is a government, a big enough body of Native Hawaiians engaged in the process, that they need at least 50,000 or more votes to approve, to say, yes, that is sufficient to acknowledge that Native Hawaiians have a voice in this process. They're also saying, in terms of the numbers, that if there are fewer than 30,000 voters who engage in this process, it's not going to fly. Right? So,
Big N or little N?
I'm going to get there.
Okay.
That's the next piece.
Yeah.
Okay?
Confusing, Commissioner.
Pardon me?
I'm confused, that's why between those.
Okay.
You know what?
Yep.
We're sitting back here.
Yes.
Having difficulty following you.
They haven't.
Where are we?
11.
Sorry, I'm on one by one. I'm so sorry, we can't see. We're on 11. Okay? We're on page 11. I switched with you. You can have one so that I know what they're looking at. So it's saying on page 11, the bottom slide, the first slide on the top, that was what I was going over. Have to have at least 50,000 Hawaiians engaged in the process, whether they're big N or small N. And if there's less than 30,000 Hawaiians, no matter how much blood quantum, less than 30,000 engaged, it doesn't fly. The federal government doesn't think that that is a big enough voice of Hawaiians if we are represented by less than 30,000. That's what this rule is saying. Yes?
Does this population represent the body politic? Or what specifies this number? What justifies that 50,000 or 30,000? How do they arrive at that specific number? What is it in play? Body politic or what?
Right now, 50%.
No, not the blood quantum. The population density. What does that represent?
Of 50,000, they're basing it on their base roll. Well, they're basing it on what they think needs to be a sufficient number of Hawaiians on our base roll. They say you can use Kana'iolowalu,
So based
or you
upon-
can use anything else.
So I understand. So based upon the total sum that the
Of Native
population is
Hawaiians.
speaking to, then And this represents a significant portion of that population base that they're looking for.
They are saying that if 50,000 Native Hawaiians are engaged in this process, if you can show the federal government that at least 50,000.
That 50,000 is a magic number that just created. So it represents what? My question. Does it represent?
I don't know. That's a great question for you to ask them in your federal rules comments. I want to know that too. How do you come up with those numbers?
They explain it in a 75-page DOI.
Yeah, so it probably needs a little bit.
What they did was they took the census data on the amount of Native Hawaiians.
I get the correlation. My question is, what does that specifically represent? A title?
It represents all of the Hawaiians that are registered in Na'i Aupuni.
That answers my question. The small land represents those who are 15% or more of the brother race of American 70%. What does this determination of population represent? Does it represent the body politic? Does it represent community school alumni? Does it represent the
They're saying that it represents the body politic. That's what
All
they're
right.
saying.
It does represent the body politic.
That's what they're saying.
Yes, sir.
So that would be a great question, though, to ask them to respond to. So the important part of the federal rules is that when you're making your comments, if you have specific questions, when they come back, which is why we have 70 pages, they have to answer every comment that was made in the public forum. They say, many people said this, and they respond to it. So if that is a question that people want to know about, we should be saying, how did you get there? Does that represent the body politic? That's a good question. Yes.
My question is clarification of the word engaged. Is that people that are on the list or people that actually vote?
Well, that's a loaded question because to be voting, you gotta be on the list, so that's one and the same. Right? You cannot vote if you're not on the list.
Okay, but you can, engaged. You can have your, all you can vote.
Correct, so there
And
are
less than this 50,000 vote.
Yes.
So are you still counting them as engaged because they're on the list? Or engaged because they actually
Engaged
voted?
because they will have to vote. Right? If you read what it says more than half of votes cast. Right? So there has to be more than half of the votes cast of all of the ends. If you have less than 30,000 votes cast in this process, and then we go and apply for federal recognition, and the documents show that in this process we had 28,000 Hawaiians who voted for these 40 delegates. It doesn't cut it. They will not recognize us if only 28,000 or 29,000 Hawaiians show up. It's clear, you must have at least 30,000 Hawaiians who cast the vote. If you have 50,000 or more that cast the vote, they say thumbs up. Like Kutni, you're eligible to be recognized as a government entity. Yes.
So if these votes were, or these names were collected from the 80s, which is where the first list came from the 80s, then you have Kana'iolowalu, that amounts to the so-called 95,000.
Yes.
Now, how many of them are dead?
I don't know.
Of this 95,000, that they are jumping to conclusions to that these people are qualified to vote.
Correct.
When, I mean, one of the candidates, my mother passed away 5 years ago, but her name's on the list. Maybe my mother's name's on the list.
Yeah.
She's been dead since 1990. So, how can you say this is a fair situation?
So-
if many of these people mock it already. And yet
Well, so I will tell you, in the last election, my deceased grandmother got a voter card that says, you vote at Aina Elementary. Same thing. Are there deceased people on the state voter registration? Absolutely. And why? Because if we want them removed, they can't remove themselves. Their family has to call and notify somebody. So if we haven't done that for our ohana, and people don't show up in the numbers that are required to get recognition, then we won't be recognized. So if you're saying 30% of those folks are deceased, or 10%, then clearly they can't cast a vote. And if we don't meet these numbers, the way the rule is proposed right now, less than 30,000 cannot be recognized. That's what they're telling us here. More than 50,000, we can't. I'm going to go here to this hand and then to you on the floor. Yes.
Okay, so I want to talk about the numbers.
Yes.
So if 30,000, less than 30,000 means we're not sufficient,
Yes,
why is it 31 sufficient? Why does it require 50?
right. So that is a good question, and that is a question that we will ask. That they don't address what happens if 42,000 Native Hawaiians show up, right? That means we probably have to be in some kind of negotiation. They're only saying under 30 doesn't cut it, over 50 is a slam dunk in terms of, but they didn't, I agree. So we should say that in our comments, that we want more clarity, we don't want a gap, right? So 30,000 and 50,000. Below that, it's gonna say how many small ends and how many big ends. If fewer of 9,000 of those 15,000 voters are small ends, again, they give you the numbers, 9 and 15. So just like we have 30 and 50, there's a gap, like what you're saying, between 9 and 15. They say out of those 30,000 Hawaiians, if you get 30,000, 9,000 of them must be small ends. If you get 50,000, 15,000 of them have to be small ends.
So what we're saying here is that we don't all have equal voting power.
Then you should be saying that to your comments to the DOI, right? So the small ends, you're correct that this document is saying that the small ends, if there's not enough of the small ends who vote on this, it could die. And that yes, they are requiring a sufficient number of small ends because of what I said earlier. It's the oldest and strongest legal protection for Native Hawaiians that they need. They have a federal responsibility right now to small ends with or without recognition. Small ends are recognized in the Hawaiian Homes Commission Act, but there is no governing body, right? But small ends already have recognition in the 1920 Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. They don't have a government that is recognized.